Hey there, everybody. Dave Valente with the Political Deep Dive. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's been a few weeks since we got in a brand new show since before the Thanksgiving break. So I appreciate your patience. We did have a couple of best of episodes, and I appreciate those who watched those episodes. They were really good ones. Ones uh, Tara DeSisto, the former development director of the Libertarian Party, and then Jen Moore, who is going to be our guest next week. Kind of as a follow up to her show the one that we showed last week, where she talked about her experiences as the Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania's chair and all the crap that she had to go through to do that. But uh, very excited to get the show back rolling this week. I've got a very interesting show. We've heard all kinds of information about what's going on in China, what is happening, why why they're still doing this thing called zero COVID. We're hearing about the protests that are going on in China, and I think it's good for us to get a firsthand perspective of what happened in China and what's going on there. And I'm pleased to bring on a friend and someone I've known for almost 15 years now. I think maybe 15 years now.
More.
Adria Spadavecchia, how are you doing?
Good. How are you, Dave?
I'm doing wonderful. So Adria and I went to Kennesaw State University. What was that? I started in 2002. When did you start there?
The second time around, I think around the same time.
Okay. And then when did you graduate from Kennesaw?
Was that 2006?
All right, so you graduated just after I did. I
Yeah.
graduated in the December graduation of 2005. And then I took another semester. We were both on the Kennesaw State University Model Arab League team, and I was going to be chair of a committee at the next university model. So I decided to take another semester even after I graduated Kennesaw. We took a very interesting class on Iran, and
Yes.
had a good time taking that class. That was my last undergraduate class that I took. But what did you get your degree in?
International politics. International.
Yay! Same
Yeah.
with me.
And then I
Yeah.
went back a few years later to try to do my education one and got all my education credits.
Excellent.
So,
Cool. So you got into after you left Kennesaw, you started doing international teaching.
yes.
So how did you get into that?
Um, Went to visit a mutual friend
Mhm.
overseas, and I was
I am on it.
I was being like a nanny governess to her children, and everyone was like, if you go get your TEFL, you can start teaching internationally. So I did that, but I also just wanted to go back to school and try to get my teacher's certification. So I went back to Kennesaw and I got a bunch of my teaching classes and the credits. Um, I couldn't finish to actually get my license because I ran out of financial aid. So I headed overseas,
Yeah,
and teaching overseas, you make good money, maybe not good American money, but good money for there. And you get to travel, you get house, you get uh, your flights paid for, your health insurance, visa cost, and you get to travel the world.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I you know I I would have done that if I was probably younger when I got my degree,
Yeah.
and wasn't married and and because I love travel. I love the idea of experiencing other cultures. So talk about some of where did you go teach?
I've taught Turkey, Russia, and China, so I hopefully my next country is not a totalitarian dictatorship.
Yeah, because I mean, Turkey while you were there, was
A
Erdogan the
transition.
so Erdogan took power during that time while you were there.
He was already elected, and I believe they were still trying to get him to step down with the election
Mhm.
process. I think he went from prime minister to president or vice versa,
Okay.
just like Putin did. Um, and the military was still trying to do their traditional role of safeguarding democracy. Soon after I left Turkey is when the failed military coup happened.
Yeah, and that was when Erdogan used that to really just purge
Yeah,
the military of all,
yes,
independent, I guess, leaders and
yes,
just staff it with loyalists
yeah,
and now there really isn't anything that stops
no.
Erdogan from
So,
doing
when
anything.
I was in Turkey, that was the famous election when the parts that weren't gonna go for his party lost power, and then the next day they went on air to be like, "It's because the cats chewed through the, power lines at the electric power plant." So, that's why they're
Memories.
yeah, had darkness.
Now, to be fair, if you know anything about Istanbul, Istanbul
Yeah.
has a ton of cats all over the place.
True, true, but they're pretty well behaved that they
Yeah.
usually go around chewing on the electrical wire.
Yeah, yeah, that's a it's an interesting thing to blame. So then,
Yeah.
when did you leave Turkey?
Okay, let's see, 2017, probably June or July 2015.
July 2015. Okay. Now you took part or you unknowingly took part in a demonstration there. Tell us
Well,
about
I
that.
mean, I was always in demonstrations in Turkey. The Turks love to have demonstrations and march. And so, since I have the dark hair and eyes and I have the right coloring, I would just be doing my errands and I would join in one to get to the next shop. I
Yeah.
think you're talking about the one towards the time I left when I accidentally walked into a Hamas one. Yeah,
So how was
yeah.
that one? I mean,
Because I was on the bus and they made the announcement that they couldn't do the full stop. They were gonna drop us off at the corner because there was something going on. So I had enough Turkish that I understood that. And I saw the Arabic announcements, but a lot of the times where I was by the stadium, so they would have Arabic speakers, religious leaders come.
yeah,
As I said, coloring wise, and I dress conservatively enough, I blend in. So I get off and then I see all the other banners and the death glares. And I'm like, oh, I mean, they're just glaring at me because they think I'm a Muslim Turkish woman who doesn't have a headscarf on and not wearing full
yeah.
coloring.
You weren't
So
conservative enough.
yeah, I mean, I had like a my sleeves came down to there. I had on like long pants, but I guess that wasn't conservative enough. So I
Yeah.
got out there very quickly. But yeah, that was very scary because they were giving me like those death glares, like they were gonna,
Yeah. I couldn't imagine getting into a Hamas rally. That would be inadvertently. Uh, I as somebody who works in DC, every day like if I'm down in DC, I'll go to the White House because every day they have some kind of protest.
yes,
There's a permanent protest that's set up outside uh, across Pennsylvania Avenue in Lafayette Park. There's a permanent one that's it's kind of all over the place. It does like anti-Israel, anti-nuclear energy, but it's like this kind of catch-all tent that's been set up there since the 80s. And then, but there's always some kind of protest going on out there, and they're usually lame. Like I've never seen a really good protest, except for the circumcision folks.
there's a
Yeah, it's that was interesting. So they'll dress up in these white smocks, like a full body, almost like a hazmat suit smocks, and they have like blood on the crotch. It's lovely.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's the
I
fun
don't
protests I
think
run
I've
into.
been involved in any of those. I
Yeah.
mean, I unknowingly joined a lot of stuff over the years living overseas just to
Anti-circumcision was not on
yeah.
the main protest. Yeah, I could
No,
see that.
the Russians really don't seem to march or protest anything, so I didn't do any of that in Russia.
Yeah. Yeah, so talk about your time in Russia. How did that go?
Cold.
I bet.
Yeah, well, Russians are Russians, it takes them about 6 months of to warm up to your neighbor or going into the daily store,
Mhm.
like, every day to get anything. So that's all true. I mean, I don't think anyone was really happy, but I think Russians just kind of go with the flow that they're gonna live in that kind of system and not really have any freedom of choice or goods. I made enough money that I was living in a very nice area of Moscow, and I could go shopping in all of the luxurious food stores. Um, I know we like to think that our sanctions actually did something, but I was still able to get all the sanctioned goods
Yeah.
because Russians were getting them through a different way.
Yeah, they just buy it through,
Yeah,
maybe Belarus or some
yeah,
other satellite country and or maybe Kazakhstan or something along those lines and get
yeah,
it
but,
in there.
um, as I said, I mean, I did buy the, like, Putin calendar. I
Did you
did buy some of the Putin mugs and shirts.
Nice.
Uh,
Was that the
as I
one him riding a bear or riding a horse
I
shirtless?
have that one. I got the one for my mom with him and Trump on it.
I've seen that one.
Yeah,
Awesome.
so yeah, they my Russian coworkers didn't understand while my me and the other teachers were, like, shocked when Trump won. They're like, "Why are you shocked? He is a great man. He will be a great president. He will bring cooperation between Russia and the USA."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you could call domestic spying cooperation. So you how long did you stay in Russia?
I was in Moscow for 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah,
Alright, so
so
you did
3
2
years
years.
in Turkey, really 4 years, 'cause I did a year before that, but 3 years teaching in Turkey, 2 years in Russia, and 5 years in China.
5 years in China, that's amazing.
It was
So
only supposed to be 3, but we all know what happened in 2020.
yeah. So, uh, how did you get hooked into gigs in Russia and China?
Uh, Russia was just an ad, and the one of the girls I worked with at the school in Russia, then got a job in China, and she was the vice principal, and she knew I was gonna leave Russia because I couldn't take the weather anymore, and she said, "You should come work with me in China, you'd really like the school. We're in a smaller city, it's only 2,000,000 people, but it's on the main rail line to Shanghai, and it's a really good school, and you'd enjoy it." Uh, I went, I got the job. The visa process was a nightmare. That took me almost 5 months to get my work visa to get to
Wow,
China.
that's
But
crazy.
yeah,
So, where in China were you? What was the name
um,
of the city?
it was a smaller city called Yixing. It's in Jiangsu province, so about 3.5 hours from Shanghai.
Okay.
So
So, I mean, people don't realize how big cities are in
yeah,
China.
like I said,
Like,
it's a small city of about 2,000,000, and it was
yeah,
part of a bigger city.
New York, I don't think is in the top would be in the top 20 of Chinese cities.
No, like
Um,
the city I spent the last year in China in had a bigger population than my state of New Jersey.
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
People yeah, I mean, of course, China is a nation of what, a billion,
probably almost
1.3?
2,000,000,000 at this point.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
was like 1.8.
it's getting close to I mean, I think, India is starting to catch up as far as
Yes.
birth
Well,
rate, but
shockingly, the birth rate in China has been going down regardless of what the government tries to get it up.
yeah, well, I mean, especially the last couple of years, you would think
Yeah.
that the issue, having more mouths to feed when you can't leave your home is,
Yes. Yeah.
not a fun thing. Although if you can't leave your home, then there kinda leaves you a lot less options of what to
Yeah,
do
but,
while you're hanging out.
when you've been in lock it I don't use the term lockdown for China because China doesn't
Yeah.
lock you down, they lock you in. When you're in an endless cycle of lock-in and you don't have money coming in and you don't know what the future is gonna hold, you're less likely to want to be in the mood to
Yeah, sure.
to
Exactly.
reproduce.
Um, so let's talk about before COVID starts. How is
Yes.
everything going in China? Is it
Okay, so if you would have asked me December 2019, what's the future of China? I'd say the future of China is they're gonna join the modern Western world because all the teachers in my school, including the Chinese staff, were traveling internationally. They were educated. The one the two-child rule was working for them because the parents could actually invest in the children. So the parents of my students were all traveling internationally for work, taking the kids on vacations. The government was still a dictatorship, but as long as you didn't talk about certain subjects, you were free to live your life, travel, make money, educate your kids the way you wanted to. They were showing all the Western movies and the Western TV shows. Certain things were banned, but that's because China wanted their own version. So, you know, they have their own social media, their own Instagram, their own version of Uber, their own version of everything because it's a huge market. So, and then of course, we all know around that fall and winter was a really bad cold and flu season, and something else was probably starting to circulate in Wuhan.
yeah.
So, and then China changed like overnight, but the whole world changed overnight.
Yeah, so when was where were you and when was the first time you heard about COVID and
Like,
the
we
whole
didn't hear it in China, like, we heard about it from our friends and family back home, like, "What's going on?" So when we asked our school nurse, she's like, "Oh, it's just a bad flu. It's been a bad flu season. Wuhan's just having a bad outbreak." And then they started hearing stuff too. So it was around the time for the, Chinese New Year, Spring Festival, and they were just telling everyone, "Stay home. Cancel your travel plans. You know, there's something going on, just don't travel." So it wasn't till a few days before my flight out when I asked, and they're like, "Yes, there's a new virus in Wuhan. Since you're flying out of Shanghai, you should wear a mask." And then we got into Shanghai and we check into the hotel and they're like, "Don't leave the hotel. There's cancer. There's cancer out on the streets."
Oh, wow. So, now mask wearing is not, even then was not a big thing in Asia. I mean, like, they people wore masks a
Yes.
lot because
Yes.
of previous pandemics like the Asian
And air
flu.
quality. I had been wearing a
Yeah,
mask since we got to China for the air quality.
yeah, yeah. So,
Um,
it wasn't out of the ordinary to be told to wear a mask.
no, because basically if my Chinese coworkers came to school with a cold, they'd put a mask on because I think it's what they started doing during the bird flu or the H1N2 in
It's
Asia of wearing a
yeah,
mask. Um, but then like we went out in Shanghai. We are like, guys, it's like a flu outbreak. Like we know what
I
to do.
guess
Wash your hands, don't cough on people. And like the streets of Shanghai were like deserted and everyone looked really scared.
interesting. So, you
Um, so we flew into Hong Kong and like now that's when you start seeing the Hong Kong staff now has like gear on at the airport and
mhm.
they're taking everyone's temperatures. But then we fly into New Jersey, like Newark Airport, and there's nothing. Like no one's inspecting us, no one is stopping us, no one is checking our temperatures, asking our travel history. Just welcome to America.
Yeah. And
And I think at that point they were already announcing that they were going to shut down travel to China, but they never really did.
yeah, and uh, which makes sense that New York was the first area that really got hit in the United States.
Yeah.
They never really stopped travel, or didn't stop travel early enough.
Well,
Um,
even when they stopped direct flights, Dave, they never stopped indirect flights.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. So, you make it to the United States. You're here when at the start of the domestic
yeah.
pandemic, and you go back to China.
Oh,
And
because the whole time of the pandemic, China has very good apps, WeChat, and I was getting daily updates from the local government and the national government of China and my Chinese coworkers. So you'll get an alert. Sue was on the bus at this time, got off at stop A at this time. They have tested positive, and they would give you the actual like what they did that day. So you were supposed to turn yourself in. So even in the US, I was getting updates. So the big update, my city was about to reopen. A man was having an affair. His mistress was from Wuhan. He didn't want to admit it, so was going around town. And finally, his children had symptoms. He took them to the hospital. The children and him tested positive. So my city had to go back into the lockdown and cleaning everything for 10 days. So in China, if you do something like this, they then shame you. Like, so everyone knew the story. Like his picture was up on the thing, like his name, his family history,
oh
like
my goodness.
the fact that he got it from a mistress. So I knew what China had done. China shut everything down, shut its borders between intercity, intertown travel. So nobody was going anywhere. And I felt like they were controlling it better than we were in the US, where everyone was buying toilet paper for no apparent reason. I couldn't get soap, I couldn't get hand sanitizer. I was trying to get my elderly parents groceries, and my school was like, "Oh, it's gone now. It's beginning of March. We're all good. You can come back." And I'm like, the
Wow.
tickets are getting really, really expensive, and like we're about to probably go into lockdown. I'm like, if you guys want me back, you need to buy my ticket now. So I think I flew out of the US on March 7th,
Oh, wow.
March 10th of 2020. And yeah, so
Yeah, it was like that Monday, like,
yeah.
all of a sudden, we're starting to hear stuff in the United States about, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, everyone stay home, and
And no one actually stayed home, like, because
ah,
my parents are in, like, the New York, New Jersey area, and, like, while everyone was staying home, everything was the grocery stores and all were still open, the roads were still open. Like, I had a friend from New York who, when everything shut down, just traveled across America,
yeah, yeah,
and I'm like, "I don't feel confident about this." So, I I chose China at the time.
well, that's the interesting thing, you're talking about the apps that they have,
Yeah,
I know China has been heavily criticized for their over control, the use of these apps,
yes,
and you're talking about, I mean, knowing exactly where you are at all times and be able
yes,
to provide that tracing, and
yes,
then the shame and all that stuff.
yeah,
Um, they also talk about the social credit system that China has
yes,
that really can choose between, whether you get to go do anything or you're kind of a social pariah.
yes.
Um,
It's
it's
great.
interesting. I don't know that that would ever fly in the United States. I know that some people would be okay with it, but I don't know that it would ever fly here.
Quite honestly, it made your life so much easier. We all knew they were tracking us and following us, and we knew there were things we couldn't talk about, but it was your Uber. It was your Uber Eats. It was your booking your train and plane tickets.
Mhm.
It was your social media. It was your WhatsApp, all in one app, and your banking app. So,
Yeah.
like, let's say, like, the plumber comes to your house. You don't write the plumber a check or give him cash. You guys just scan each other's phones.
Wow. I mean,
Um,
to me, in some ways, you're just like, I don't want the government knowing that much about me, but really, the United States government could know all this stuff about us. I mean, we got all these apps on our phone.
Yes, but none
They
of the
have
apps in
access
the
to
United
it.
States communicate to properly to each other, so I've been very annoyed trying to set stuff up.
Yeah.
Well, if the whole app was in Chinese and I could set everything up in no time, it was very easy.
Yeah.
But once again, like, we knew what not to talk about, so
Yeah. I'd probably get myself in trouble there.
you would, yeah, you definitely would.
So,
But,
alright, now you make it back to China, you land in China, what happens to you then?
okay, so I landed in a city, I forget the name, that was over by the Korean border, and I had a connecting flight to Nanjing. So at that time, they weren't making you quarantine at that city. They were letting you get to your next destination. So we land, they make an announcement in Chinese, of course, that if you're going to connecting cities, you can get off the plane after the biohazard people come to check your temperature. Thankfully, a man next to me spoke English. He's like, okay, I'm mostly going to Nanjing airport. You can follow me and I will help you with everything. Because you had to fill out all this paperwork. They were asking your travel history, all of these things. And it's all in Chinese. And I get there and the guy's, well, have you been exposed to COVID? I'm like, no. He's just looking at me like, no, you're not. You're coming from the US. And I'm like, I was living with my parents. I was staying with my parents in their retirement community. Like, I could have been exposed, but I don't no symptoms. So they then clear us out a path, everyone going to connecting flights through the airport, like with everybody in the bio gear. We get on that plane, we fill out more forms, and then I get into Nanjing. But since I'm going to a smaller city from Nanjing, I have to wait for them to come pick me up. So they come get me in the biohazard suits, put me on like a huge bus, and I'm the only one on the bus besides them. And then we drive to an like intercity rest stop. I get off the bus. There's now a team of 10 people. We take photos with me in front of the bus, and everyone's in the suits. And now I'm in an off-duty city bus with this team is 10 people in biohazard suits.
Wow.
And me, who's jet lagged. I haven't eaten in days because I have been missing like the food options. And then I get into my quarantine hotel. Thankfully, I was one of the first ones doing this, so I didn't have to pay for it. And I spent 2 weeks in the Chinese quarantine hotel. Like they only tested me twice. Once when I got there, that was negative, and then before I would be released, they tested me again. I don't know. I shared some of my pictures of the food at the time. I don't know if you saw it. There was a lot of like
Yeah.
heads and fish and things with eyes and all. Um,
Was it stuff that, I mean, was it appetizing at all? I mean, things staring
Thankfully,
back at you.
once again, it's in China, so we were all on the same app. So they add everybody in quarantine on an app so we can all talk to each other. So
Oh, yeah.
one of the Chinese people was Chinese American. He was a vegetarian. He's like, "Don't worry, I'll add you to the vegetarian meal." Like one of my friends flipped out, and because he only eats hamburgers and sandwiches, so they got him sandwiches and hamburgers and beer. They got him beer because he flipped out so much.
Wow.
Yeah. I just wanted the vegetarian food, and
Nothing
you know,
staring
'cause
back
I'm usually jet lagged when I first got back to China anyway, so I would have been sleeping the first week
Yeah.
anyway. So after the 2 weeks, I was allowed to leave, and they sprayed me down. They sprayed my like bags down. They released me to my school's principal. She drove me to my community. So basically, all apartment and housing communities in Russia are walled off, and there's like barbed wire and fences, and there's a guard post at each exit. So the guard allowed us to come in. My school staff had updated my health code to show that I was good. I was green. I had a green health code. I could go in.
Yeah.
The community health representative met us outside of my apartment, so all the Chinese people could watch and see that I was getting signed off, that I was healthy, and I had permission to come back in.
That's so, initially getting into China, now you're there, you're teaching every day. You're not they're not really restricting your movement at that point,
No,
right?
at that point, teachers were discouraged from traveling too much, but my friends who were business people were traveling back and forth throughout China to do business. It
Mhm.
was more if you left China, there was no guarantee you could get back in.
Okay. So, how long did it start until it started really getting really weird in China?
Honestly, like up until June, July 2021, China was basically following a lot of the same standards everybody else was. Like the rules were kind of weird. Like if I got on the bus or the subway system, I had to have a mask on. Uh,
Mhm.
If you went to a nice sit down restaurant, you had to call and make reservations because they could only have half the amount of people.
Yeah.
McDonald's didn't have anything like that. Like, if I went to the movies, we all had to sit, like, a couple seats away from each other. Um, so it wasn't any worse than, like, let's say, New York, New Jersey, or Europe.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only stricter requirement was getting in, but a lot of countries had the quarantine requirement, so
That's I mean, yeah, it sounds exactly like, even here in West Virginia, we had, I mean, we got through our stuff a lot sooner. Like we went from, we went from lockdowns and not being able to go to restaurants to just following the fucking guidelines as our
yeah,
governor told us. Opening up businesses, and we did have for a period of time have reduced ability to go into a restaurant and be like 50% or it
yeah.
started at 25% and then 50%. And then we finally were able to go fully to a restaurant.
Like, there were cities that did have stricter rules occasionally, but it would only last 2 or 3 weeks, and then they would open the city or the village of that part of the town back up again. So
So talk about the when did it change and what happened?
so I was gonna leave June 2021, but my flights kept on getting canceled. So my friends told me there's such a shortage of teachers, move over to the next bigger city, and you'll get more money and you'll have more stuff to do. So that's what I did. In the first month, July, there, I was getting myself settled in. I was going to all the different expat things, making friends. And August, I was going to travel for 2 weeks in August before I had to show up for my school. And then end of July, that's when my town and a lot of other towns started announcing there's a surge. We're going back into lockdown, lock in. Now, on a side note, around the time in July is when the government went after private education, after school education, and the gaming industry, and literally shut down whole industries overnight
Wow.
and started discouraging parents spending money in education and English classes for their children. Um, so it's But supposedly why they were stricter about COVID was because what was gonna come to Beijing in, like, February? The Olympics.
Yeah.
So they wanted to have COVID under control for the Olympics was the excuse.
And I mean, to an extent, I mean, there were some outbreaks, but
Yeah.
the Olympics did eventually go off. I wouldn't say without a hitch, but at least that
Well, when you're
it
wondering why
happened.
didn't the Chinese people rise up before that is we were all told that after the Olympics, everything would open back up.
Yeah, it
That
was kind of the carrot and stick thing. Yeah.
Yeah, this was needed so that we could, China could show a good face to the world that we have COVID under control and that everyone's following the rules. And it it still hasn't gone back to normal. It's gotten more extreme.
Yeah. So, you use the term "locked in." So talk about what they do when
So
they
you can be locked in many different ways. You can literally be locked in your actual apartment where they like seal your door shut. You can be locked in your building. You can be locked in your apartment complex. You could be locked in your district and you don't know. And your friend across the street could have a totally different thing going on. And no one knows why or how. Like, I came home one day and the whole other side of my street was sealed shut.
wow.
And those people could leave their apartments, but they couldn't leave their apartment compound.
Wow.
They were sealed in for 2 weeks.
So during the last few months, I was following this TikTok account where it was a woman that was, American woman, and her husband, um, that were locked into their apartment, and the things that they had to go through, uh, you know, the difficulty of getting food and fresh food into their compound, the daily and sometimes twice daily testing.
Yes.
You know, I I probably got tested maybe 6 times the whole time I
Well, I'll
was
be
there.
honest with you, up until that point, I only had 3 COVID tests.
Yeah.
2 when I first got back into China, and 1 in November or December 2021 because I was traveling between cities for teaching, and one of those well, we were officially part of the same city until COVID came, and then
Yeah.
we were in zones. So I get tested again, but then starting January, I was tested every single day. Um, so it went from just having random, like, tables to each compound gets, like, a cube, like a
Wow.
box
Yeah.
with the plexiglass, and the health workers stay in there, and you have to go, and, they swab you.
Yeah. I've heard that they've gone from the mouth swab to back to the nasal swab.
They could, because when I left, they gave me my kit to do my own nasal swab. So I think it still might be both. They might do the throat swab, then you do the nasal one and do that. But that all depends on where you are and whatever rule they feel like following.
Yeah.
So
But, it really goes to this whole idea that they know exactly what's going on, every move that you make. So if somebody tests positive in your area that lives in your building or lives in
yes.
your zone, immediately they're shutting down.
Well, yeah, and that's some things might happen. You might all get on the bus, and you might get be carted away to the warehouse, the COVID warehouse, because you really don't get put in a hospital anymore. Or they just shut down your whole entire building
Mm.
until they test everyone. So like October 2021, I went to Disney and it was fine. Everything was normal. The following week, somebody in Disney tested positive. So they shut down all the Shanghai Disney World and tested every single person.
I heard that there was a situation at Disney where they kept people there for
Yes. That's
weeks.
the other thing. Um, if you're in a business and there's someone tested positive or there was a near, like they're near someone who tested positive, they would literally lock you in that business
That's
for a
perverse.
couple of days.
That is so perverse. I couldn't imagine
As I
that.
said, at first, when they would do this to you, the healthcare workers would come to you. They would bring you fresh food. Like there is people checking on you to make sure you and your family were okay. And then from June 2021 onward, it's just been like Hunger Games. So
That's
like
crazy. So yeah, you were telling me that like when they used to bring food
yeah.
and get you food, now they're no longer doing that and locking
There
you in.
are deliveries of food from I had friends who got that at their compound because they weren't allowed to leave. But from what I've been told, it's not enough and you don't get to choose.
Wow.
So
So, if they're allowing delivery, they're allowing not enough food.
yeah.
I mean, how has it not erupted before? Like, I know that they're doing it now. There's lots of protests going on now.
Um, because at one point, as I said, everyone's gotten sick of it. It's been a cycle. As I said, I went through I don't even know how many lockdowns since end of July 2021 until I escaped July 2022. Like we would get out of it because it's basically almost the same thing you guys had here. There'd be an outbreak, they'd be really strict, then the restrictions would start being lifted. Each week without a case, more restrictions would be lifted. You'd go back to normal. Oops. 5 weeks later, there's another case. Um, and things would start shutting down again. So, like, maybe they didn't shut down school and work, but they shut down the hair salon, the gym, the backgammon parlor. like, um, some restaurants could be open, but not bars. Like, and you never knew, and it didn't really make any sense.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, our restrictions never made any sense.
yeah.
Like,
So at that point, as I said, like, remember I said they told us this was temporary. Once the Olympics are done, we'll go back to the old restrictions we used to have. And if anything, they got stricter and stricter and stricter.
so do you think that this was really more of a ploy or more of a power play on the
Um,
part of
I
the
think
government?
it's more of a power play by the government
Yeah.
because when the rest of the world was in the pandemic, I said this the entry standards were stricter, but you were free to move around China and free to basically live your life.
Yeah.
And then when the rest of the world lifted their restrictions, China like went like a totalitarian nightmare. I was telling okay, I'm gonna explain the health code to people. When I first got to China, you just had a little health code, like a check, okay? Like you are healthy, you haven't been around anyone you didn't do. And usually we would just screenshot it. I'd go a lot of times I would just show it, they wouldn't scan it, no one cared. I'd walk in and out of where I needed to be. Um, over time it evolved and each region of China has their own health code and health check. So by time I left, my screen now showed three things. It showed where I've been, it showed my COVID test status and my vaccination status. And in order to get into my apartment, I had to scan it. To go to school, I had to scan it. To take the bus or the subway, I had to scan it. To go shopping, I had to scan it. And if and then they had sting operations. So if like grandma who ran the fruit market didn't scan you, they would arrest grandma and fine her.
And then probably put you in in lock-in, right?
So that would be the daily update. Like Chu did not show his code. Ding did not ask to see codes today. He is endangering the health of everyone in our city.
Shame.
Yeah.
Shame.
Um, so at that point, like we got together for expat Thanksgiving in November. We were in neighboring cities. We didn't see each other again until June
Wow.
because one of us would get out of lock-in our city and then the next city would go in. It was like just an endless cycle.
Yeah. So you were in China until when?
July 5th, 2022. And then I
All right.
escaped.
So let's talk about your how let's talk about the plan to escape and then how you escaped.
Okay, so because as I said before, you don't know what's going on in the other cities and their things. So you could get on a train and one person on that train has tested positive or had a near contact. They will literally stop that train and take everybody off the train and put you on a bus and take you to a compound or a warehouse and test everybody. And depending on your test results, you could go or stay there. So just because you have a plane ticket or a train ticket doesn't mean you can actually get there. So since I was in a smaller city, it didn't have an international airport. So I think Shanghai had the bad lockdown almost until May lock in. So even if I wanted to leave, I couldn't really get to Shanghai
Wow.
because there'd be no safe way or guarantee that they would let me in or I could take a train. So I started thinking now I want to leave, but I don't want to give my job notice because if I can't get out, I have nothing. So I started looking at the flights and booking my tickets. I booked 3 different flights. I paid extra money, so if I needed to change, I could change. Um, End of June, school took my passport to renew my visa. Um, at this point, Shanghai was open, but if you got a driver to Shanghai, you then had to pay extra money because you had to pay for his quarantine fees and his missed 3 weeks of work. So the price like went from reasonable to really high. July 4th, I went, picked up my passport from passport control with my new visa, packed bags. At that point, my city was about to go into lockdown again, but Shanghai was still open. But there is rumor Shanghai might lock down again. So I get
Oh.
my bags, get to the train station. The train station won't let me in because I slept through Sunday's COVID test.
Ugh.
So I had results for Saturday that were negative, and it showed that I took the test for Monday, but it didn't show what it was yet. So I had a little mini meltdown at the train station. Like, I just want to leave. Let me on the train, which didn't work. So I went back, got back to my compound. Every one of my apartment complexes lined up again. and they're making the announcements. So I put my bags away, get food, then go back down to see what they're doing. And now they've added the nasal thing to get the nasal swab, but you have to do it yourself.
Brain
So
duster.
they give you the little kit. Um, and this worries me because from what I was told, that's what they do when they're going to lock everybody into your compound.
Hmm.
So my friends reassured me, like, your results are going to show up at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Just go to sleep and then try again. So thankfully, my results showed I was negative. I had all green, headed to the train station. And of course, everything in the train station is shut because the city is about to go back into lock in. Thankfully, I got into Shanghai. Shanghai, you're greeted. They're all in the suits, the blue, like full. And I have to get tested again. And then not only that, I need a new health code because I'm now in a different province and a different city. So that took about 45 minutes for them to do that. And then I take a taxi to the airport. Now, remember, Shanghai is a big international airport. Do you know how many flights are flying out at that time?
No idea.
One.
One.
So the only counter open is the one for my flight. And
Hmm.
once again, everyone working is in the full like biohazard gear. There's no shops open. You can't even buy a bottle of water. Like there is nothing. So I have to go through all of their government, more inspections, whatever. Thankfully, the US government had lifted the COVID test for US citizens. It had already lifted it us for China a couple of weeks, no, a couple months before that, basically saying if you can get to an airport, just get out of China. We don't care what your COVID status is, just come home.
Yeah.
Um, so I cried when I got on the plane. And
Oh, bet.
I was like, I don't care if this plane turns around, I'm jumping out. Like, because at this point, like China has trashed their economy because like if you're a delivery driver, they seal you into the truck, Dave. Like you are sealed into the cab of the truck. Like there's a seal on it. Like so you can't get out of the truck. And like the food delivery drivers were homeless. They had to choose to make money for their family, and they were living like under in like under overpasses. Like they set up like a tent city because
That is reverse.
you can't back in. You can be, and then or they if you were a factory worker, you got locked in the factory so they can make things. Certain people were locked in their offices
Oh my goodness.
so that you could go to work still. So I'm not surprised that they're finally starting to like because
Well,
at
yeah.
this it's you have more chance of dying of a lock-in from that fire, suicide, just because you can't get out to get your medication. Like if you're about to give birth, they still won't let you out.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I've seen the news stories, especially the one that happened just recently about that's really kind of led to the big
yeah,
resistance the last few weeks of the apartment fire in Xinjiang province in Urumqi. Um, they're blaming the fact that there's barriers and things in front of that compound that the fire department couldn't get to the
yeah,
building. Yeah, it's the same thing that a lot of people here complain about the idea idea of isolation and
yes,
using that to really lock down on the virus and trying to prevent the virus, but what at what cost?
yes,
Mental health,
yeah,
suicide, things like that. I just, the it's scary. I mean,
yeah,
like I've lost a few friends over the last 2 years because the mental health things, whether it was, they were veterans dealing with PTSD and it became too much, or they had mental conditions before things started, but this just exacerbated it. It's it, I my hope is, and I don't know that China will ever do that. But my hope is that both the United States and other governments will look at what they did during this pandemic and understand that a lot of it was just messed up. Like it wasn't based in anything uh, science based. Like I get what the government was trying to do in China, like the whole zero COVID thing, and
Yeah.
trying to. I get what you're trying to do. It just doesn't make any sense.
Well,
It's
part of
not.
the issue is the vaccine. They're only using the Chinese developed vaccines, and when China was shipping the vaccines to other countries and other countries tried it, then the rest of the world realized the Chinese vaccine wasn't
It's
as
crap.
effective.
Yeah.
I have all 3 jabs of my Chinese vaccine because I was a teacher,
Hmm.
but their claim is a lot of elderly people haven't been vaccinated. But they also find so many cases of COVID because they test everyone every single day, and a lot of those people don't have any symptoms, Dave,
Yeah.
or they have a very light case.
Yeah.
So I really don't think it would be a total disaster where, like, they'd lose tons of their population if they just let
Yeah.
COVID.
Yeah. Yeah. I
'Cause
mean, because it's allowed. United States being a little more lax and everything.
yeah,
It's allowed the vaccine to mutate. When we start doing vaccines, then the virus mutates to become more virulent,
yeah,
but the
less deadly.
trade-off with that is that it's less deadly.
Yeah,
So it spreads easier, but you're less likely to die from it, you're less likely to have bad, bad sickness out of it. You may just test positive.
but, like, as I said, I totally saw how the governments can use our technology against us,
Oh, yeah. That's
and
that's a scary thing.
overnight.
Um,
I
you
mean, so
know
our government has the same, um, ability to do that.
Yeah. In fact, we were talking about and we'll get into the story a little bit later about the uh, uh, union busting that Joe Biden did with the rail workers. I have no doubt that if shit hits the fan in China, that the Biden administration would probably come to the rescue of the Chinese government because the idea of a total economic meltdown, even worse than what's going on in China,
Yeah,
is much scarier to the Biden administration, to the economic viability of the United States,
yeah.
that's already shaky. Um, I have no doubt that he would come down on the side of the Chinese just
Well,
because of the economic impacts. But let's see. Anything else about the your Chinese experience? I mean, did you have fun before it went to shit?
oh, yeah, like, before, if you woulda asked me before everything happened, I would tell you to go to China, I would tell you to invest in China, now I would tell you not to invest, don't go,
Yeah,
and, don't download any Chinese apps.
but I got TikTok.
I know, like,
Well, I say I've got TikTok. I will say that I've got 0 people watching right now. I'm sure
yeah, so
that's been throttled right down. So I'm talking about China, but that's fine. Maybe I'll find that my account has been completely disabled when we're done
I'll
tonight.
be
But
honest, like, I use all Apple products, but it kind of has always worried me that Apple's the only one China hasn't banned.
that's probably tells you something. But yeah. All right. Well, let us go and start with our weekly news quiz, the CNN weekly news quiz. I will bring up the screen here. All right.
Okay,
Okay. So the CNN weekly news quiz for December 1, 2022. So it drops like, Thursday, Friday.
okay,
Uh, we like to look at the pictures here because they give us context clues of what the answers are further on in the quiz. So we see the volcano. So we're probably going to talk about the volcano in
Hawaii,
Hawaii. Merriam-Webster's, it's the word of the year, which I know. And then this one, I'm not really sure. This might be the vote on marriage protection.
yeah.
So, all right, let's start. There are no prizes given but folks in the audience, feel free to give us a answer if you see it. Let's go to question number 1. This week kicked off a solid start to the holiday shopping season, following Black Friday and Cyber Monday, which was observed on Tuesday. Giving Tuesday, Sharing Tuesday, Saving Tuesday, or Quiet Tuesday.
Giving Tuesday. Mhm.
Yep, I believe that's it. Correct. After snagging major deals, many shoppers participated in Giving Tuesday. I did as well, and gave a heightened generosity when people give to their favorite charities. About $3.1 billion. That's pretty good.
Oh,
I like that. All right, question number 2. What caused delays and headaches for millions of travelers across the U.S. this week? Let's see, a TSA computer malfunction, fuel shortages, severe weather, or power outages.
I think it was the severe weather that was supposedly causing those delays. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I mean, I traveled.
Yeah.
I came back from Georgia. I didn't notice fuel shortages. I wouldn't say it's fuel shortages. Yeah. Anybody in the audience have any answers? Y'all still awake out there? All right. Well, let's go with severe weather. That's usually the cause. Yes. Severe storm system delayed thousands of flights as many people tried to fly back. That's right. There was a big one that rolled through the South and uh, um, upper South, the upper kind of Bible Belt area, and Tennessee and that type of area. So, all right, question number 3. I think we would know this one. Unprecedented protests over COVID-19 lockdowns recently took place in which country?
China.
Yes, thousands of people in China took to the streets in a rare show of dissent against the ruling Communist Party and its zero COVID policies. Some have even called for the resignation of Chinese leader Xi Jinping.
Yeah, not happening.
All right. Question number 4. The Senate on Tuesday passed legislation to protect same-sex marriage, or same-sex and interracial marriage. How many Republicans supported the bill? Ooh,
Oh, I don't know. 117, 8, 24.
no, 6, 12, or 24.
Okay. I don't know. How many do they have to pass?
Uh, I'm gonna say 12.
Yeah, I feel like that would be like
I mean, not all the Republicans in the Senate are crazy. I mean,
yeah,
they've got their share, but I'm
yeah,
gonna
I
say
think
12.
yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Anybody else have any answers out there? I know we're at a little bit of delay for the people in the audience, but yeah, I'm gonna say 12. Yes.
We are so smart.
Bill is supported by all members of the Democratic caucus and 12 Republicans, the same dozen GOP members who backed a bill for procedural vote earlier this month. Final vote was 61 to 36. Shame on you, 36. I'm just gonna
Well,
say that right now. Shame on you. That's that's jerk level stuff. All right, question number 5. Which city issued boil water notice to millions of residents due to a loss of pressure at a purification plant? Los Angeles, Chicago, Phoenix, or Houston?
Houston.
Yes, it was Houston. City officials in Houston said this week said water for drinking, cooking, washing hands and faces, and brushing teeth should be boiled before use to destroy all potentially harmful bacteria and other microbes.
Because
Notice,
they lost electricity again, shockingly, since Texas has its own power grid.
yeah, so effective, and they want us to seed. Look at that. Let's see. Question number 6. Which country did the U.S. men's national team recently defeat in a high stakes World Cup match? Iran, England, Argentina, or France?
Iran.
The Islamic Republic of Iran. The great Satan won.
Yes.
The hard fought 1-0 victory against Iran this week. I mean, of course, we know what happened,
Yeah.
but That was a very stressful game to watch. I almost threw up a
It
couple times.
was. And we
All
made it to
right.
the next round.
Question number 7. The world's largest active volcano is erupting for the first time in nearly 40 years. Where is it located? Japan, Hawaii, Washington, or Wyoming? That
Hawaii.
is Hawaii. Yes, the Mauna Loa volcano is erupting in Hawaii on the Big Island. There is no threat to property, but state officials have warned potential air quality issues, including VOG, which is volcanic smog. That sounds lovely.
It
Uh,
does.
they do say that it will probably impact their the highway between the two biggest cities on the Big Island. Um, and I'm wondering because you're on an island, you could probably just take a ship and put stuff on a ship and move it over. But I know that the Jones Act might play a role here, um, and foul things up because the Jones Act. People don't know what that is. I think every ship that goes into U.S. port from a U.S. port has to be a flagged U.S. ship,
Okay.
um, and it it hurts, especially in the island, like Puerto Rico or Hawaii or even Alaska. Um, if there's an emergency, getting ships there to service those ports. So, um, and it makes it much more so. That's why things are a lot more expensive in Hawaii and
Hawaii.
Puerto Rico than it is in the United
And
States
Alaska.
and Alaska. All right, question number 8. Which word did Merriam-Webster selected as its 2022 word of the year? Gaslighting, Omicron, Vax, or Metaverse?
I don't know.
I do. I saw the story. It was gaslighting.
Gaslighting. Okay, really? You thought that would have gotten earlier? I would have
Yeah.
gone for,
So
like, Metaverse or, like, Omicron.
yeah, I was thinking Metaverse. If I hadn't seen the story, I probably would have chosen Metaverse. But the online dictionary chose the word gaslighting, which defines the acts or practice of grossly misleading someone, especially for one's own advantage. It's been around as a word. It's just really getting much more popular in use, especially in the world of politics.
Well, I mean, I my friend and I were discussing the other day that we feel like we've been gaslight by, like, China.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, you can't exert that kind of control over a population without just gaslighting the shit out of them.
Yeah.
Like that's amazing. Which global leader did Joe Biden welcome to the White House this week for his first state visit since taking office? And I was
France.
actually at the White House this week and when he was there. So uh, the choices are Rishi Sunak, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, French President Emmanuel Macron, or Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
French
And
president.
French President. The old Eisenhower office building, which is to the west of the White House, had really big French and United States flags draped across it. It was kind of cool.
Was there a lot of, security out there then, or
Oh yeah. So whenever there's like world leaders in town, um, Lafayette Park, which is right across from the front side of the White House, where they drive up, um, that is completely shut down. You can't get anywhere near the White House. I don't even know what they do with the standing protest. I know during Donald Trump's reign, when he shut down Lafayette Park and put like chain link fence around it during the last probably 8 months of his term. Um, that I know that they moved that protest somewhere, but
okay.
yeah, it was sad to see. It's gotten sad to go to the White House. When I first started going to the White House, first time I saw the White House in person was, let's say, 92. People were driving on Pennsylvania Avenue. Like, you could
Yeah.
drive down
Oh, yeah.
Pennsylvania right in front of the White House, no problem. Then there was the guy that, took the automatic weapon and started firing at the White House when Bill Clinton was there. They shut down Pennsylvania Avenue, made it like a little walking area. But the fence has gotten higher. They're pushing people further and further back from the White House. And it's the Lafayette Park side is not. I mean, it's not the iconic view of the Rose Garden side of the White House, but it's the people's house, and it's getting
Yeah,
harder and harder to see the
but,
people.
the we had to make a choice between freedom and security, supposedly.
Yeah, and God, during Clinton's administration, there was the guy that fired the automatic weapon, just started
Yeah,
walking down the street, and then there was the guy that flew the ultralight plane into it. Um,
and then, of course,
then
the terrorist
yeah,
threats.
yeah. I mean, there was a bunch of people that climbed over the fences during Obama's administration and early in Trump's administration. I get why they built the fence higher,
Yeah,
um, but keeping people away from the White House just seems antithetical to me as far as as an American institution. But with Trump, he did the chain link fence across Lafayette Park. After the January 6th attack, Congress pushed people back from the U.S. Capitol. A little more understandable, but once they got all that stuff fixed, they should have taken down those fences. But
yes.
it took them several months to do that. All right, question number 10. This is for a chance to get 100%. Which luxury fashion brand faced widespread criticism for publishing a controversial photo campaign involving children?
Uh,
Louis Vuitton, Hermès, Chanel, or Balenciaga?
I can't even say it, Balenciago.
Yeah, I think it's that one.
Yes.
Correct. A
Oh,
Balenciaga photo shoot caused uproar for featuring children in a disturbing advertising campaign.
it was
So
toddlers with bondage bears.
what? Why? Well, I mean, I understand why because we're all talking about it, or people
Yes.
were talking about it, and it became a big issue. But why would you do that? Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Well,
But hey,
art is supposed to be about pushing the envelope and making us talk and question things, but
sure. I mean, I get that, but
at the
there's
same
probably 100
time,
different things that they could have done that
yeah.
would have gotten us
As a
talking. And not,
parent, would you let your child do that?
oh hell no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Uh,
there's a lot of people involved in that whole shoot and,
yeah. It makes you question the parents. Like,
yeah, like,
what were you
members.
thinking? Do you have your child's best interest at heart? Um,
I mean, because that's a whole entire advertising campaign. Like, I'm assuming there's a team of people who would work on that, not just it wasn't like it was just one guy with a camera.
yeah. I mean, yeah, how it got through, like, in working with the government, like I understand that when we do stuff, like the first thing I always talk about is will it pass the headline test? Like
Yeah,
if somebody started talking about this on headlines, how would it look? And like it got through several levels of
yeah.
approval to for them to spend money and put this out there as some kind of really cool thing. And I mean, were they babies or were they
No, toddlers, I'd say
toddlers?
about none of them
So,
are older than 4.
but
Those are
still, I mean, you're exposing them to bondage bears. Like,
yeah.
don't they're probably going to remember this. And could you imagine being one of those kids and getting into high school, and then all of a sudden, one of your friends finds out you were like one of the bondage bear kids, like, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden that picture starts floating around.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, I mean, in this day and age, everything will follow you for the rest of your life.
exactly. I am so thankful
Yes,
that
that
I came of age before the age of
all
social
that.
media and phones and all that stuff.
Mhm.
I've got enough embarrassing crap out here now from the time I was like in the late
Our
20s.
20s, basically, Dave.
Yeah. I've got about 15 years of crap out here that
Yeah.
kind of embarrassing, but uh thankful it wasn't during my formative years.
Yes.
Although you can't get away with all the stuff that we did when we were kids. So
No, no. I mean, half of it's probably illegal now, and our parents would have been arrested.
oh, we would have been sent to Gitmo for some of this stuff. Like
Yeah,
we
I
went
mean, our teachers would have been arrested, the whole neighborhood.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Hey, 10 out of 10, perfect score.
Yes.
You're welcome back anytime
Oh,
to be on the show because you are 10 out of 10 uh,
yes.
on the quiz here. All right, so let me stop sharing this. So we talked earlier, mentioned a little bit the railway.
Mhm.
Joe Biden to stop the railway strike, which would impact. I mean, look, I get
Yeah.
why it's done. Like you don't want that kind of that level of disruption to the American economy. I get that, but what they've really done is made American workers indentured servants.
Like, my dad's a Teamster.
Mhm.
Um, you know, Union 560, he was a shop steward, and we were discussing why hadn't their unions pushed for sick days before this? Like, why have they worked
True.
so long without any sick days? Because that's usually my dad's like, "That's usually a union standard is for us to get
Yeah, I
sick
mean, it
days
seems counterintuitive that to be a unionized labor force
and not have any sick days."
and not have sick days, like and maybe it is because they knew that if they pushed the issue that this was what was gonna happen to them.
Yeah.
It to me, I just don't understand why people think that this was a good idea, or at least part of the compromise should have been, "Hey, we're gonna let make these guys go back to work or not strike, but you guys gotta give up sick days." And why that is such an issue for the railway workers.
I mean, and the fact that in this country, we really don't have a workers' bill of rights because that's supposedly,
Uh,
socialism or communism. But most countries have a standard sick day that everybody who works gets.
yeah, this one I've been and that's why when I was thinking about this story this week, like knowing the extent to which our government would say, you know what, we would go to bat for a regime like China cracking down on its citizenry, um, just to ensure that they're going to continue to make the widgets we need to make our products. Um, and we've of course American history is replete with us backing regimes that do less than
Well,
savory things.
it's also full of the government breaking strikes.
Yeah, yeah, and
And
it's a big story
violently.
here. It's a big thing here in West Virginia. I mean, our anybody who has a kind of cursory knowledge of West Virginia history. I mean, we almost, I mean, we did to an extent have a shooting war over labor rights. Like the modern labor movement in the United States owes a ton of stuff to West Virginia. Just from Blair Mountain and all that stuff. Um, that all of the battles and things like that. The U.S. had not until 1986 had not bombed its own citizens since the railways, or not the railway strike, but the coal miner strike in West Virginia. Um, that there wasn't a government agency that had bombed its own citizens until 1986 with the um, Move movement in Philadelphia. Um, but
So I wasn't surprised that the government forced the union to accept the deal. I was hoping because I think one of the senators and congressmen, some of them had actually included giving them some sick days, but that was not the one that passed.
nope, that's not the one that passed. And so the question is, do they become wildcat strikes? I know the police will do blue flu,
Yeah,
um, but police also have sick days to use for blue flu. Like
they do. They
if
do.
you're a railway worker, you don't have those
No,
rights, and getting forced to work. I just
and you don't get paid. And then they said they face retribution. They
yeah
also said that the corporations had cut the workforce so much that if anyone is sick, there's no one who can fill in their shifts.
yeah, and it's not the only industry facing that people have stopped coming, going into work, or people have stopped going to that industry to work.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not surprised that they're having issues filling these things, but having somebody working when they're deathly sick, um, just doesn't seem, especially after having come out of a pandemic.
And I know right now with the children, the kids are facing the RSV, the flu is back,
Yeah,
just normal cold, and then COVID. Like, it's a perfect storm of illnesses that you should probably just stay home for a day, drink some hot fluids.
yeah, but no, you got to go drive a train, and
Yeah.
a train is, the if you're not 100% with it, a train is very hard to stop. It doesn't stop on a
Yes.
dime.
Yeah.
So, if something happens where they're going too fast and they come off the track or something like that,
It's a
these
major
guys,
disaster.
yeah, it's a major disaster, and these guys face, jail time for things like that. And, they're not going to get a variance because they're sick.
Yeah.
Um, it's sad. My hope is that at some point that they're going to be able to get sick days, and
Yeah. Or I
I
it better.
honestly, I know a lot of my more libertarian friends will probably disagree with that, but I do hope that there is some kind of union awakening. I think the problem with the unions is a lot of especially within the libertarian community, is that they've become too political. I think one of the lessons that the unions will learn out of this is that all this money you dumped into the Democratic Party over the last however many years hasn't done you a whole lot of good.
No.
You're
Well, I mean, you and I would probably both agree that the two-party system is broken.
oh yeah, yeah.
And
The two party system is broken, and
the whole way we elect people needs to be totally reformed, but that's probably not gonna happen anytime soon.
no, because the people that benefit from the system are the ones who control the ability to
Yeah.
make those changes.
I was
So
just telling my brother-in-law there's nothing in the Constitution about political parties. That's a
no,
totally
like, of course, uh, uh,
there were none when they
George,
wrote the Constitution.
George Washington warned about creating political parties and factionalization. So, um, yeah, it's amazing. We've had so many politicians like Eisenhower's warning about the military industrial complex.
Yeah.
Politicians will make these announcements as they leave office, but we don't listen.
No.
So we got a little bit of breaking news that we got today. Hold on just a second. I've got a fancy little graphic here. Yes, the news is broken. Oh, you can drink on you can drink alcohol on camera. You're good. It's all I was drinking the whole time. Uh, we heard tonight that the Attorney General of Iran has disbanded the morality police in Iran. Now, a little bit of background: the protests in Iran have been going on since September. Masa Amini, a young woman, was killed for not wearing a headscarf. Launched protests throughout the country that have gone on for the last few months. The most significant protest since 1978, leading up to the overthrow of the Shah, and you know something had to give there. And they've tried to crack down. They've threatened and put many people under the death penalty in Iran, but it's not causing the protests to abate. In fact, they're getting worse. And so this week we've gotten a couple pieces of news. Tonight was the idea that the morality police is going to disband. Now, do I trust that it's going to be the morality police disbanding completely? No, I think they're just going to get folded into the regular police and continue to do what they do. But the other new piece of news was that they are looking. Now they're just saying they were looking at the headscarf law and whether to relax that. If that happens, that would be huge, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Over the years, it's gone back and forth. There's times where it's lessened, where I could go if I was there, I could go out with a loose scarf,
Mhm.
not full, like, a tight scarf.
Yeah.
And then there are times where, and you don't know, it really depends on who's enforcing it at that moment.
Yeah, it depends on what city you are in.
I
You
mean,
know, where Amini was, where Amini was, she was in Kurdistan,
yeah,
and the police are much more strict there because they don't like the Kurds.
of course.
So they're gonna beat the hell out of you,
Yeah.
but yeah, she died of her injuries, even though they said that she had a pre-existing heart condition. Just BS, everybody knows that, but
But, like, part of the way these states enforce it, and I don't think Americans can really appreciate it unless they've faced, like, a totalitarian government or a police state, like, it's always changing. So one thing could be okay on Monday, and then by Tuesday, it's totally wrong, and no one's gonna explain it to you. Like, it just changes like that, and, like, you can get beaten, you can be dragged away from your house, and, like, there's no explanation, no one's gonna help you, no one's gonna stop it from happening, and you never know when it's gonna happen.
yeah.
So,
And,
like,
you know,
you basically life in a state of anxiety and fear.
yeah, and I think that's why we're starting to see pushbacks in places like China and Iran about, the living conditions and the lack of freedom, lack of mobility. I think it's scary to see some governments getting much more totalitarian. It's almost like you see your history repeating with,
Well, yeah, the world goes in a cycle.
yeah, I mean, we're it feels like we're maybe what Russia and Ukraine are doing is kind of an analog to World War I, just setting us up for something that's going to be much more bigger and deadlier down the road as World War II Part Two, or World War III with nukes. Um, but yeah, it's interesting to watch the world right now. You know, uh, Sometimes you need weed to watch the news. Like it's hard, man.
I'm not gonna jinx us. I'm gonna say 2022 so far, we're towards the end of it, has not been as traumatic in some ways.
Sure. Yeah, it
And
hasn't been. Yeah, it hasn't been well, depending on where you're at. Like,
yeah,
I would say if you're Ukrainian, it's like, "This year sucked."
but Ukrainian anyone who's a former Russian territory, they know to expect that. Russia was a colonial power. It was a colonial power in Europe.
Yeah,
And I mean, basically, they never got more than a few decades of freedom before Russia invaded them.
and, you're led by a guy who was, the, East German, spy chief for
Yes.
the old Soviet Union before it collapsed, who wept when the Berlin Wall fell.
I mean,
Uh,
we all know Putin thought he was gonna do a, like, lightning strike. Kyiv was gonna, like, fall within 24 hours, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. He would've,
yeah.
like, slap on the hand, "Oh, no, you shouldn't do that to your former subject states." But we'd be like, "Well, Ukraine was part of Russia historically."
Yeah, well, Russia was also part of Ukraine historically, but
Yes, but more recent history, it was part of
yeah,
Russia.
sure.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, and Putin would have hopefully got his empire back, but
yeah.
that's not what happened, thankfully.
Yeah, let's see, we got about 5 minutes left in the show, 7 minutes
Right.
left in the show. So let's talk about, the one of the news stories this week is that the city of New York is now involuntarily committing homeless people to mental institutions. The mayor of New York is allowing police, fire, first responders to, arbitrarily commit homeless people under very much relaxed standard. It used to be that they had to be threatening, they had to be doing something that called into question their sanity. Now I think the standard is not meeting basic human needs. By definition, being homeless is not meeting basic human needs. You could literally round up every homeless person in New York City and throw them in a mental institution. Now, I would say that New York probably lacks the mental institution resources to be able to handle that population, but, um,
Um, part of the issue like, and sadly, when they got rid of the institutions, I think in the 70s or the 80s, they didn't actually no one has ever actually reformed the mental health system.
No.
And there's basically no funding, and not only that, each state has different rules and different things in each town of what they will provide people with. So, I'm interested to see if he's even really allowed to do that or if that's not violating people's constitutional rights.
Well, I think that the relaxed standard is going to violate people's
Yeah.
constitutional rights. That it really is detention and without any due process whatsoever.
And usually they can only hold you for 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah,
So, probably then be back on the streets again.
yeah, and then get rounded up, and I think it's going to end up being just either they're going to pass them off to New York State
Yeah,
for their mental facilities, which then if you're a guy living in Rochester, now you're paying for New York City's mental illness. The increased costs of using New York State's resources for mental health.
but,
Um,
the sad thing about the homeless population is I know a lot of cities and towns just buy them tickets and send them up to the next town.
oh yeah, I mean, so
Mhm.
here's my 9/11 story. So I'm in St. Louis on 9/11. I'm supposed to fly that night
Mhm.
back to Atlanta. Wake up, my sister screaming as she watches the second plane plunge into the towers. And so, immediately all flights are canceled. Um, all rental cars are gone within minutes. And, um, people are actually buying vehicles to
Yeah.
drive to where they needed to go. I get on the phone, I get a ticket on Greyhound because I knew I needed to get back home. I was working in a couple days and wanted to make sure I was get home to my fiance at the time. And um, so we get on the Greyhound bus, and it's like 8 o'clock at night in St. Louis. Um, the first stop we make is the Southern Illinois Correctional Facility, and so prisons will do this, and that when you get released, if you're at a state prison, um, they give you a month pass on Greyhound. And their instructions are because I was talking to one of the guys that had got released because they hadn't even heard about what had happened with 9/11. We were all telling him about that, and they didn't even believe us. But there were, their instructions to the person who's being released is, "We don't care where you go, just don't come
Get
back
out.
here. Yeah, just don't come back to Illinois. Go somewhere." And so they hop on the bus and they spend the next month rolling around the United States finding a place to live. And, generally they just end up going back to where they were, originally. And but yeah, that's my 9/11 story. It was an interesting bus ride.
I'd
Uh,
imagine.
you know,
Yeah.
I
You
was
know, they
very
have interesting people on those buses.
clear that man, I just spent my last dollar on this bus ticket. I didn't want to get rolled.
Yeah.
But yeah. No, I'm worried about the mental health, the strains on the mental health
Yeah.
community. Not only because it has, it doesn't just impact the people that are getting rounded up, but people who want to access mental health resources that are having a crisis outside of homelessness will find it much harder to get their needs taken care of.
Well, for the US, for some odd reason, we don't like the idea of having a government, you know, social, agreement, like, with services like this, like mental health, medical care,
Hmm.
uh, aid if you're homeless, In this country, there's no reason why anyone should be homeless or suffering from mental health. We have the money, we have the resources. We just don't have the will.
Yeah, I mean, I
Even if we didn't wanna do government, we could set up a private network that covered everything.
yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of times when you see some of these government uh, things, they do it in opposition to private help. Like, um, there's been those stories of ministers who feed homeless in parks who are rounded up because, well, we don't know what the sodium content of the bagels you're giving the guy in the
Yes.
park are. Like, makes no sense at all. Like, let's feed the people, make sure we get that basic need. If you're all about the basic needs, make sure we fix that basic need. Allowing people allowing tiny home communities that you can house people. They just take getting that basic need of housing
Yeah.
taken care of. A lot of people would just do that whole NIMBY thing and don't put it in my backyard.
Uh-huh. And no one
Uh,
wants to change zoning laws.
no, no. So government does stand in the way of private citizens helping the homeless, or many different things. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's sad to see. I just have a bad problem with. Um, oh, there's a question. Are you on Facebook,
Yes, I am, but
Adria?
it's private.
It's private. Yeah, I know. That's acceptable because yeah, I don't know if I trust Craig. Yeah, I trust Craig. Craig's fine. Craig's great. Um,
Well, if he's actually friends with you, then he could find me that way.
yeah, look up Adria on my friends list. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what the answer is here, but I don't think that rounding up homeless is the
Well, I
answer.
mean, I don't think it's actually gonna last because as I said, I don't think that's actually legal.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
and I don't think that they're going to get the people the help that they need. I mean, if it was, we were going to round them up and get them help and social services and all that stuff.
yes, and there
Great.
was gonna be help, and they were gonna be put in a program for someone to help them. Because a lot of them, it's just because they don't take their medicine, or they've lost their Social Security card or their ID over the years when they've been rounded up and moved through town to town.
Yeah. Or their little tent community gets tossed by the
Yes.
police, like, those type of things. So,
So it's hard to get services when you have no proof of who you are.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Adria, it has been an absolute pleasure. I love Adria is one of my future ex-wives. So, I had a few people that I went to college with that are I have attained that status of being a future ex-wife, and I will say that she is my favorite one. Don't tell the other ones.
Aw,
So, but
that's right. The other ladies aren't on here right now.
that's right. Well, and you're awesome. So,
You were too, Dave.
well, thank you. Uh, Before I wrap up tonight, I wanted to just pay tribute to a former guest of ours, Rob Rare, who was out of the Wheeling, West Virginia area. He was. We did a show with him Memorial Day weekend in 2021, talking about veteran homelessness, which we are just talking about. He ran a coalition up in Wheeling area and got veteran resources that they needed. Really, just his name said it all. He was a rare individual that believed in service. He was a former military. He served his country. He served the veterans after he left service. Um, Found out last week that he died suddenly of a very rare cancer, and aggressive cancer. And my thoughts go out to Missy and his fiance and his family. I know they left behind a couple of daughters. Um, and just the whole family are in my thoughts, and I uh, was very happy to bring his story to light on the show, and hopefully the cause of veterans homelessness will continue to be served in the Wheeling, West Virginia area. So thanks everyone for joining us this week. Next week we have Jen Moore, the former chair of the Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania, and she is now moved out of politics and has done some advisory stuff. But she's wants to tell more of her story about the problems she had when she was the chair of the Libertarian Party, and it's a very interesting story. And I think she wants to be much more. She was kinder when she spoke last time. I think she wants to kind of bear everything out. So, but we will talk to everyone next week, and I hope you all have a fantastic week. Uh, Also on January 1st, our January 1st show, we are having Chase Oliver, the guy who threw the Georgia Senate election into this fun little
Oh, yeah, I heard of him.
yeah, yeah. Chase has announced this week that he is going to form an exploratory committee to run for the Libertarian Party nomination for president. So we'll have him on. Chase is a friend of the show. We've had him on a few times, and in fact, we had him on in August talking about Dragon Con. He's a very big fan of Dragon Con, and to hear his stories is it actually makes me want to go. So but yeah, that's Chase on January 1st, Jan Moore next week. We'll have a show the week before Christmas. Probably just a news show with Dan and the group and AJ. But we'll talk to everyone in next week. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Adria.
Thanks, Dave.